Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies lost to the Minnesota Timberwolves on Thursday night. They had a halftime lead, but in the second half, Anthony Edwards scored 26 points, and then the Timberwolves used a massive fourth quarter to pull away and get the victory. This is despite Jaren Jackson Jr. scoring 36 points. On today's episode, I will, of course, talk about that game. Before I get to it, just a reminder, if you want to join an online community of Grizzlies fans with me and talk about Grizzlies games around the clock, you can do that in my Patreon community at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. You can join the Slack channel where I'm in there talking about the game with other Grizzlies fans. If you want to do that and also get extra bonus content and, of course, support the creation of this show, all of that, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. The big storylines from this game, I think we look at Jaren's huge game. We look at the shorthanded nature of the rotation, and there are some disappointments we have. We can once again be upset with how some of the bench guys played, like notably the Gigi Jackson, Zaire Williams lineups were horrible, and we can be upset that while battling foul trouble, Jaren Jackson Jr. actually did not foul out. He finished the game only playing 27 minutes, still had 5 fouls, and he was absolutely cooking while he was out there. But I think the bigger story outside of those things, and even if we want to criticize officiating, which, I don't normally do, I don't feel like the Grizzlies got a particularly good whistle in the second half and definitely not in the fourth quarter. But despite all of those things, the biggest story of this game, the most important reason the Grizzlies lost outside of their talent, was the Timberwolves just went nuts in that fourth quarter. The Timberwolves made 6 out of their 7 threes in the fourth quarter. The Timberwolves scored 68 points in the second half. They outscored the Grizzlies 37-17 in that fourth quarter. Yes, I personally disagree with the decision to bench Jaren Jackson Jr. with foul trouble, but it is what it is. If the Timberwolves are going to make 15 of their 21 fourth quarter field goal attempts, if their fourth quarter true shooting percentage is going to be 86%, well, yeah, you're going to lose. Like, I don't care how bad so-and-so is or what the lineup decisions were. That is the main issue. It was just that the Timberwolves heated up, and I didn't think the Grizzlies had the huge lapse on defense. I think it was their ineffectiveness on offense that was leading to the Timberwolves maybe getting some runouts. Maybe the Grizzlies couldn't set their defense, but you saw some superhuman stuff from Anthony Edwards. I mean, Rudy Gobert destroyed the Grizzlies. Rudy Gobert broke the spirit of, I feel like, several Grizzlies players. Rudy Gobert tied his season high with 6 blocks. He set that season high, I think it was the last time the Grizzlies played the Timberwolves. So, Gobert was dominating, Anthony Edwards was dominating, and the Grizzlies did not have enough from the supporting cast. And, of course, they're not good enough. They ran out of gas, but they ran out of talent. I mean, I'm taking promise in the fact that they were ahead at halftime. This is, the third straight game they were ahead. Or they had, I can't remember if they were ahead against the Warriors, but they were definitely ahead against the Knicks. They're ahead this one. You're playing one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. You're playing the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, and you're extremely shorthanded, and you're still competing, you're playing hard, you're cutting hard. The Grizzlies got so many good cuts to the basket. This has continued, I feel like, a trend in the last several games where, the offense is moving pretty well. There are certainly individual brilliances that are making the offense work. Like you see Jaren just going one-on-one over and over and over. Luke Kennard had a flamethrower game. He made 5 out of 7 threes. He was, hitting everything. And like that helps your offense. But also I feel like the cuts towards the basket were once again, very, very good. You saw David Roddy making some good passes on guys cutting. Vince Williams Jr. good passes. Xavier Tillman made good passes. And so I do take promise out of that. Now, getting in, I guess, to the big issues of, I wanted to skate over them, like the foul trouble and the play of the bench. Let's get into it a little bit. So Jaren was amazing. He was on his way, it felt like, to a career game. Like he could have scored 45 points again. He could have set a new career high. Like he could have gone for 50. And unfortunately, he got into foul trouble. And the large onus of the blame for the foul trouble falls on Jaren. He committed some bad fouls and he committed some regular fouls. Now, the 5th foul, this was in the 4th quarter, that one I felt in the moment seemed particularly egregious that it was Nickeil Alexander-Walker foul baiting. He was trying to get a 5th foul on Jaren and succeeded. Jaren was driving towards the basket. A little bit earlier at the start of the drive, Nickeil Alexander-Walker kind of overemphasizes a little bit of contact. He then does it again. He snaps his head back and is rewarded with the foul call. And TNT did not show a replay of this. And maybe there's another camera angle where like perhaps Jaren gets him with his arm. But like it looks, based on the one camera angle we got, Jaren is making a very normal basketball move towards the goal, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is behind him, and all of a sudden he just snaps his head back. That causes the ref to blow his whistle, and I was, in fact, surprised that Taylor Jenkins did not challenge this call. I mean, I'm sympathetic to not challenging the call because it's hard to know when to use that challenge. I mean, this was a big play. The Grizzlies were ahead at this moment, and you thought, all right, maybe we can endure this. We endured it in the 3rd quarter. When we benched Jaren with 4 fouls. We endured it in the 2nd quarter sometimes, like the end of the 2nd quarter was fine in the few minutes that Jaren did not play. But it seemed to me like in the moment, I don't think that was the right call. It seems like this might be worth it with Jaren on a heater, scoring at will, that like, all right, maybe try to keep him in the game with your challenge. But whatever that reason, they didn't do it. And then the Timberwolves immediately went on a quick, it was 11-4 run, and then Taylor Jenkins, I mean, after like a couple of possessions, Taylor Jenkins was like, Jaren, go check back in, but then you have to wait for a stoppage in play to actually check into the game. But at that point, the Grizzlies fell back down. Maybe you could say the Grizzlies had lost momentum or the Timberwolves had started clicking, and then it was just too little too late when Jaren got back in. Going over to the overall foul issue, I know we've talked about this so many times. Me personally, I would rather Jaren Jackson Jr. foul out in the 3rd quarter as opposed to this, where we lose by 15. He has 36 points in 27 minutes. He's made 15 of his 23 field goal attempts. I mean, and he's definitely our best player. And he doesn't foul out. Like, I want to live the path. I want to be alive in the timeline where, Jaren fouled out in the 3rd quarter. That's too bad. But we tried. Jaren's got to be better with his fouls. Or look at how terrible the referees did. They fouled Jaren out of the game. This path, which you're thinking, all right, maybe Jaren in foul trouble isn't as good because he's going to be tentative and he's not going to be as effective as he normally would. The other team's going to attack him. That's why you save him. And then maybe if the game's close, it goes into overtime, you have Jaren for more minutes that way. I don't want to live that life of what might have been, because this happens over and over and over, where Jaren does not foul out of the basketball game and the Grizzlies lose. I don't get it. I've seen other coaches talk about this. Mark Daigneault doesn't believe in doing what Taylor Jenkins does, which is worrying to this degree about foul trouble. I mean, defending Taylor, if the Grizzlies were down like 10, I think when Jaren picks up his 5th foul, he's not going to the bench. you're going to keep him in the game. I think because it was very, very close, you just kind of crossed your fingers and hoped, all right, maybe we can hang in this and I can buy a few extra minutes. But I felt like it hurt the Grizzlies once again. If you have more interest in my opinions on this, I don't know, listen to 50 other episodes where I complain about taking your guys out when they're in foul trouble and then they never actually foul out of the game and you lose. Now, despite Jaren only playing 27 minutes, he did enough in his time where you felt like the Grizzlies could have pulled this out, but he didn't get a whole lot of help. And I guess we got to look at, maybe next, we just look at something I'm going to call the humiliation index. This is not going to be a recurring segment, hopefully, but I felt like there were a few moments in this game where I'm like, I can't believe our guy just did that. And these things all contributed greatly to the Grizzlies' loss. Like, I'm going to start with the 4 most humiliating things. Here we go. The 4 most humiliating things from this game. One for me is the shot block Rudy Gobert had on Xavier Tillman that was called a goaltend, and then the Timberwolves challenged it. Xavier Tillman made the most feeble attempt I've ever seen a post player have against a shot blocker. He shot the softest hook shot that Rudy Gobert just swallowed. He caught the ball. The shot was so poor that it confused the referees into calling a goaltend. I'm guessing the referees said, or whoever called the goaltend said, hey, that looked weird. That was probably a goaltend. Yeah, it looked weird. It was a shot that maybe wasn't even going to get to the rim, and Gobert just caught it. And then after that point, Tillman was shook. And Tillman morphed into Bismack Biyombo and stopped looking at the rim and was too scared to shoot. And Xavier had an okay game otherwise. I mean, he picked up 6 assists. He got some rebounds. He was grabbing offensive rebounds, but he was shook. He could not attack Gobert or even think about scoring, it seemed like, after that point. So the most humiliating play for me was that one. Next on the humiliation index was Santi Aldama and whatever he was doing in this game. And Santi's been very erratic this season. In this game specifically, quite erratic. Had some good moments. Had a couple of fantastic dunks off of baseline cuts. Made a 3-pointer when he stretched out the defense. I think I made 2 3-pointers, actually. But he was trying to trick the referees into calling fouls on Gobert. Totally failed at that. I don't know if he was trying to intimidate Gobert with some weird stare downs. Complete loss. And then he tried to score on Gobert in the paint 5 times and missed all 5 shots, and they were awful shots. And one of them is in the 4th quarter. Luke Kennard's wide open, and it's like Santi's about to go do something weird again. And he did something weird again. He had a combination of 3 or 4 strange running hooks where he was kind of pushing off with his off arm and trying to draw a foul, and it was awful. And I'm sitting there watching Santi Aldama with a, what are you doing? And I feel like, again, not to feel too much empathy with the coach, I feel like I understand Taylor Jenkins at some moments where I'm like, if I was the coach of this team, it would be a, what are you doing? Get out of the game. So I'm calling Santi's play the second most humiliating aspect of this game. Third on the humiliation index, I'm going to say every minute Zaire Williams played. Zaire Williams, my Lord. In his defense, he's probably the player on the team most dependent on Ja Morant. We knew that. We knew losing Ja was really going to specifically hurt Zaire Williams. Now, in the first 2 games after we found out Ja was out, Zaire was pretty good. He had a great game against the Mavericks. He was pretty good against the Clippers. But the last 3 have been so bad. And I feel like I watch him and basically just mutter to myself, just give us anything. Just please do anything. And so far, no. He was 2 for 8 against the Knicks. He was 1 out of 6 against the Warriors. I mean, we won that game. Okay, cool. And then he was 1 out of 5 in this game and gave you nothing else. And I know he was credited with 2 steals. All right. 1 steal, somebody fell down on the Timberwolves and the ball just came to him. The other steal was one of the worst plays I've ever seen by Zaire. This is the one where he shoots the corner three-pointer. I mean, normally, Zaire corner three-pointer is good. Just dunk it and shoot corner threes. Unfortunately, Zaire was not open. Naz Reid blocked his corner three-pointer with both hands. So Jordan McLaughlin jumps out of bounds to save the ball that his teammate Naz Reid blocked, and he throws it into Zaire. That's your steal. So Zaire gets his three-pointer blocked with a two-handed block, gets the ball after the missed shot, or, after the McLaughlin tries to save it, and then drives into the paint, gets his layup blocked by Naz Reid again. So Keith's humiliation index: 1, Tillman's shot getting blocked; 2, Santi Aldama trying to score in the paint; 3, Zaire Williams; and we'll go 4, the poor Memphis Hustle. After maybe the greatest moment in Memphis Hustle history, beating the Warriors behind Gilliard and Gigi Jackson. Gigi and Gilliard, brutal games. They missed all 6 of their field goal attempts. They scored 1 point. That was on a Gigi Jackson free throw. And in their defense, they're young and they're two-way players. I mean, Gigi Jackson's very, very young. Gilliard, not that young. But between Gilliard and Gigi and Zaire, just an absolute black hole from your bench. And it was obvious. We saw it happen. The fact that the Grizzlies got outscored by 25 points when Gigi Jackson and Zaire Williams were on the court together. Yeah, no surprise. I watched the game. It was horrifying. I mean, the actual numbers are kind of worse than maybe I dreamed. The Grizzlies were outscored 33-8 in the 10 minutes those guys played together. The Grizzlies turned the ball over 7 times and made 3 field goal attempts. As a team, 3 out of 21 in those 10 minutes. Now, the lineups, some of this is because just the team is so shorthanded, and it was a little bit weird. So Conchar gets the start. Conchar got a DMP against the Warriors. They put Conchar into the starting lineup, perhaps because Zaire was so bad against the Warriors in the starting lineup. Maybe it was because Conchar's greatest ever game was against the Timberwolves in Minnesota. That was that 17 rebound game. You remember, I'm sure. But Conchar started, so that meant coming off the bench, you had Zaire and Roddy and Jackson, Gigi Jackson and Gilliard, and that meant that some of these bench lineups got real weird. You actually had times where there were 4 bench players on the court at the same time. They went 10 deep, which I'm not a huge fan of. I honestly feel like they could have done this game with no Jacob Gilliard minutes. We've seen that before. We've seen this team go 9 deep regularly, even when they're shorthanded, but they went 10 deep this game. So the first bench unit, or where you had most of your bench guys in, was Jaren and Vince playing alongside Santi, Gigi, and Zaire. Now, honestly, I don't hate that lineup. That lineup should work just fine. You have our maybe 2 best players, Vince Williams Jr. and Jaren Jackson Jr., playing with Santi, who should be your best bench guy, playing with Zaire and Gigi. I'm okay to see that. And this lineup gave up a 13-0 run to end the first quarter. You saw the limitations of Vince Williams Jr. You saw him have his pocket picked. You saw him get forced into some turnovers. And again, he's not a primary ball handler. And credit to the Timberwolves. Maybe this is because there's a little bit more tape out there now on Vince and people are getting the word. But credit to the Timberwolves that they were extending their defense. They were actually guarding full court sometimes. They were guarding all the way out to midcourt in the half court. So that forced the Grizzlies into turnovers. So you had this terrible 13-0 run to finish the first quarter. Then in the second quarter, you start with Gilliard, Roddy, Zaire, Gigi, and Tillman. Now that last lineup I said I like. This lineup Oh, Lord, no. Never again, please. Never, ever. So that lineup kind of struggled. That lineup also came back at the start of the fourth quarter without Xavier Tillman. It had Jaren Jackson. But even still, like Gilliard, Roddy, Zaire, and Gigi all together, no, I don't think that's feasible, workable. Do not think we can do that. And so that's where the Timberwolves patched together a 13-1 run in the fourth quarter, where the Grizzlies went up 5, where they were up 5 or so, and then all of a sudden they're facing a double-digit deficit. Now, you don't want to read too much into one game, and I don't think I am, because like they were ahead. I mean, you had them basically all playing pretty well, and they went into the fourth quarter with a lead because of like the play of Luke Kennard, because of the play of Vince Williams Jr., because like the coaching staff, they did play their main guys heavy minutes. Like they're not spreading out the minutes to the point where like, why'd this guy play 15 minutes when you could have played so-and-so more? No, they played Luke Kennard over 30 minutes. They played Xavier Tillman, 35 minutes. Vince Williams played 34 minutes. Like they're leaning heavy minutes on their guys. Of course, they pulled Jaren with foul trouble and just, we're extremely shorthanded. Personally, I do think going from 10 deep, like just having a 9-man rotation would have been better. Maybe they were playing Roddy because, this is a homecoming game for him and he's been pretty effective on the offensive end of late. But for whatever reason, they played all 10 guys and it did not work to their benefit. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this game. And there's a few more, I think, interesting stats to mention. We'll do that right after this short break. Hey there, Grits and Grinds listeners. I'm just telling you once again about Underdog Fantasy. If you want to play daily fantasy for cash, if you want to play in private drafts with your friends, if you want to do season-long best ball, if you want to participate in higher or lowers against the statistical projections for individual players, you can do all of that at Underdog Fantasy. And if you sign up now using my promo code FBBF or by clicking the link in this episode's description, Underdog will match your opening deposit up to $100. Give Underdog a try. Use that promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description. All right, so Luke Kennard with his 5 made three-pointers, he moved past Tyreek Evans for 37th in Grizzlies franchise history in most three-pointers made. John Conchar, who had an excellent plus-minus game, led the team with a plus 14. He had 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal, made both of his field goal attempts. One of them was a three-pointer, and get this, John Conchar passed Juan Carlos Navarro to move into 23rd in Grizzlies franchise history in made three-pointers. Now, Vince Williams Jr., I love him. Can't get enough of him. I already pointed out he caught the ball up a few times, struggled, I felt like, with the Timberwolves' length and defensive pressure. Like he got picked on in the second half by Anthony Edwards. I specifically told my Patreon supporters in our Grits and Grind Slack channel, like I was terrified of this matchup. I figured Anthony Edwards was young, brash, and obsessed enough to be like, I want to annihilate Vince Williams Jr. I don't feel like Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, and others care enough right now to be like, who I want to destroy tonight? Vince Williams Jr. I feel like Anthony Edwards maybe could be like, I'm going to kill this guy. And in the first half, it was going great. Oh, it was going great. Vince was holding him to 2 points. But, whoops. Second half happened, and Ant went off. The Grizzlies couldn't get stops. But despite all of that, and despite, Vince missing a couple of shots, I thought they were pretty easy putbacks, and maybe the way that the other bigs were playing was contagious, the way we were missing shots on the inside because you're nervous about Gobert. Despite some struggles from Vince, he still had an excellent game. He had 10 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Made 2 three-pointers. So I can't get enough of Vince Williams Jr., and I think this is super interesting. It seems like Taylor Jenkins can't get enough of Vince Williams Jr. either. Of course, we're missing Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane and John Morant and Brandon Clark and, Steven Adams and on and on. And so because of that, Vince Williams keeps playing. And I credit the coaching staff for seeing that, hey, Vince Williams is clearly better than everybody else. Maybe it's so obvious that we don't give them that much credit, but I personally do, because I've watched the Grizzlies forever. I've watched every game of the Taylor Jenkins era, and there have been lots of times where I thought, hey, this guy right here, he's better than the guys in front of him. Why doesn't he play more? And then there'll be times that those specific players have big games. And then the next game, I'm like, hey, last game, that guy was amazing. Why didn't he play more? Well, this year, there's been no such disappointment with Vince Williams Jr. He continues getting the trust and the playing time. And here's the unique stat, or the thing I found extremely interesting. Vince Williams Jr. played almost 35 minutes against the Timberwolves. This is now the 8th game in his career where he has played 34 or more minutes. In the 5 years Taylor Jenkins has coached the Grizzlies, there have only been 7 players to have more games playing 34 or more minutes. The only players for the Grizzlies since 2019 to have more games playing 34 or more minutes are John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks, Tyus Jones, Steven Adams, and Jonas Valanciunas. Vince Williams Jr. has been played 34 minutes or more by Taylor Jenkins more times than Taylor Jenkins played Kyle Anderson, Brandon Clark, Grayson Allen, DeAnthony Melton. I mean, the only guys to have more 34-minute games under Taylor Jenkins are like big-time starters and Tyus, who filled in and played heavy starter minutes. That's remarkable to me. Everyone comes to me with the, hey, is Vince Williams Jr. your new DeAnthony Melton love? I'm like, yeah, sure. I love watching Vince Williams Jr. play. Who doesn't? But there's a big difference right now with how the coaching staff is treating Vince Williams Jr. compared to how they've treated other players in the past. Like Brandon Clark has just 5 games in his career of playing 34 or more minutes. Vince has 8. If you just count games that don't go to overtime, so games that end in regulation, like Kyle Anderson played 34 or more minutes twice in his years on the Grizzlies. DeAnthony Melton did it 0. The difference between Vince and DeAnthony is this coaching staff plays Vince Williams Jr. So I know there are some nuances to that because of how shorthanded the roster is. But I still feel like in other years, we'd be seeing, hey, Zaire Williams played 20 minutes. Vince only played 24 or whatever. They are playing super heavy minutes to Vince Williams Jr., and I credit the coaching staff for doing so. And also, we don't have to worry about this for another 5 weeks. It's also another argument for why you should maybe start Vince Williams Jr. over Marcus Smart. Ideally, I think you think about Marcus Smart, you say, that guy should play 25 minutes. And if you have a starter who it makes more sense to keep his minutes at 30 or under, and you then would have a bench player where it makes maybe more sense to your team because of his youthfulness and because maybe he's the best conditioned athlete in the NBA or one of them, or at least the best conditioned athlete on your roster. It seems possibly that's the case. I mean, Vince Williams Jr., you saw in the Warriors game on MLK Day, he had primary ball handling duties. He was bringing the ball up, which expends a lot of energy. He's bringing the ball up. He's playing 34 minutes. He's leading the team in scoring. And oh, guess what? He's guarding Steph Curry full court the whole time. I think he might be, as the people say, built different. So because Vince seems to not tire that much and seems to be able to play heavy minutes and the coaching staff is trusting him to play heavy minutes, it's easier to play a guy heavy minutes if he's in your starting lineup. Otherwise, you got to do weird stuff. You got to leave him on for like these 14, 15-minute stretches. So that's just another argument for if Marcus Smart would accept it, the minutes might make more sense if he comes off the bench. Anyways, I guess we can mention David Roddy. He did have 8 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist. And that, I guess, is everything to wrap up this game. Conclusions. Please let Jaren foul out in the third quarter. Just a couple times. Just a couple times to shut me up. That's all. Let me see what happens when, oh no, all of our best players fouled out in the first half. That was weird. Maybe we shouldn't do that anymore. I don't know. I'd rather try that than wondering how many points could Jaren have scored if he was left in there. We'll never know. Anyways, thanks to everybody who has joined the Patreon. If you want to join the Patreon, do it at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Come hang out over there, and I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. Anyways, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you don't do that already. Write me a 5-star review in whatever podcast app you're listening to this on. Anyways, have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.